Today we will be comparing eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. Make sure you write down all red and green information. So first we'll be discussing everything that living things must have in order to be considered living, and what cells must have in order to be considered living things. So remember, all living things are made of cells. And our definition is a cell is the building block of all life. So the smallest structure that can be classified as a complete living organism. So we have organisms out there that are literally one cell, but we still consider them living things. Think of bacteria, there's protistas, different things that are single-celled. So all cells can or must metabolize nutrients, and metabolism is the set of chemical reactions that occur inside of cells. Here we are showing glucose metabolism, so what happens to glucose as it enters the cell and what it is converted into. All cells must also be able to reproduce by themselves. Here we have a cell that is making copies of itself. And remember, when we say reproduce, we mean making a copy of itself. We do not mean reproduce as in male-female reproduction. So all cells also must contain genetic information in the form of DNA. And here we have some DNA segments and examples. We have a chromosome. And remember what DNA stands for. It stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Remember that DNA is a nucleic acid, one of the 4 types of biomolecules we just covered. And then lastly, all cells or all living things must maintain homeostasis. And homeostasis is a steady balance of water, nutrients, and energy. Here it shows us what happens and how the body maintains homeostasis when the body temperature increases. So here we have normal body temperature. We have very little heat being lost. We have our dry skin, our closed sweat glands. As soon as the temperature of our body rises, we get greater heat loss, and then our sweat glands open so that we can produce sweat. The sweat will help us cool down so that we can maintain a normal body temperature. So let's discuss cell structures. In order for a cell to be a cell, it needs a couple of things, whether it's prokaryotic or eukaryotic. And all cells and therefore living things have these or have some organelles and structures in common. So let's discuss them. So all cells will be surrounded by a cell membrane, and these membranes are selectively permeable, which means they only let certain things enter and exit the cell. So here we have a picture or drawing of a cell membrane. We have outside the cell what's going on, and then we have inside the cell. And you can see water is being passed, so is oxygen and carbon dioxide. Other larger things will stay outside the cell unless the cell brings them in or decides to bring them in. But that's what selectively permeable means. It's only certain things can enter and exit the cell. All cells also have to be full of an aqueous solution called the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is aqueous because it contains water, or the solvent is water. And it contains all the nutrients and organelles that the cell needs. So it's basically like the goo of the cell, the stuff inside the cell. And a cell must have that. All cells also have to contain genetic information in the form of DNA that is wrapped around proteins and packed into complex structures called chromosomes. So in our cells, both prokaryotic and eukaryotic, we will have our DNA in chromosome form. And then the information that is stored in the DNA is used to make all of the cell's proteins. Ribosomes read this information and make all of the cell's proteins. So for our 4 things, we must have a cell membrane, we must have cytoplasm, we have to have DNA, in the form of chromosomes, and then we have to have ribosomes. So those 4 things all cells have. And again, every cell will have its DNA in the form of chromosomes. The location of those chromosomes is the big difference between eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. So eukaryotes or eukaryotic cells will store their DNA inside of a nucleus. So here we have our nucleus. Inside the nucleus, we will have our chromosomes, and in that chromosome, you'll find your DNA. And remember, the nucleus controls the cell's functions because it has the instructions in the form of DNA. So prokaryotes or prokaryotic cells will have their circular chromosomes of DNA that are found in the cytoplasm of the cell. So here we can see in this drawing of a prokaryotic cell, the DNA is kind of just out in the cytoplasm. It doesn't have its own membrane or anything protecting it or encapsulating it. It's just there. Here we have another example of a prokaryotic cell. And we call the chromosome circular because it makes a loop. It doesn't mean that it's actually a perfect circle shape. It's just looped. Eukaryotic cells also contain other things, like other membrane-bound organelles, like the ones shown below. So here we have a Golgi body, mitochondrion, endoplasmic reticulum, lysosome. So these things will be found in eukaryotic cells, but they will definitely not be found in prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells do not contain any membrane-bound organelles. Okay, so that is the end of our notes for today. Make sure that you wrote down everything red and green, and if you need to go back, go ahead and go back. Have it ready for tomorrow, and we will see you tomorrow.